5 words just changed the entire calculus of this conflict. Speaking at a press conference in Tehran today, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi addressed reports that Iran had quietly requested ceasefire negotiations through back-channel intermediaries. His response was unequivocal. "We never asked for a ceasefire. Iran did not initiate this aggression and will not beg for its conclusion. We are ready to defend ourselves as long as it takes, regardless of cost, regardless of duration." That phrase, "as long as it takes," is not diplomatic boilerplate. It is a precise strategic signal designed for multiple audiences simultaneously: the Iranian domestic public, regional proxy forces, and most critically, decision-makers in Washington and Tel Aviv who calculated that 2 weeks of sustained strikes would bring Tehran to the negotiating table. Iran's foreign minister just stated explicitly that this calculation is wrong. What the statement actually means, the timing and format matter as much as the words. Araghchi spoke from prepared text at a formal press conference with international media present. According to Reuters and the Financial Times, the statement carried Supreme Leader Khamenei's explicit authorization, meaning it represents the Islamic Republic's official strategic posture, not one official's personal position. The "as long as it takes" framing signals that Iran is not conducting a conventional cost-benefit analysis where damage sustained at some point exceeds the value of continued resistance. Tehran is framing this as a matter of national survival, where rational cost calculations are subordinated to the imperative of not appearing to capitulate under foreign military pressure. But the statement creates constraints as well as leverage. Having publicly declared before international media that Iran will resist indefinitely, Iranian leadership has narrowed its own future options. Governments that make public commitments of this kind cannot easily reverse course without paying severe domestic political costs. Washington's frustrated reassessment senior administration officials, speaking anonymously to Politico, expressed frustration that contradicted public messaging. One described the situation directly. "If Iran isn't seeking off-ramps, we need to reassess whether current operations are moving toward any resolution or just creating indefinite stalemate where both sides absorb costs without achieving strategic objectives." That statement reveals the core planning assumption Iran just invalidated. American strategy appears built around a model where sustained military pressure forces Tehran to seek negotiations within weeks. 2 weeks of over 2,000 strike sorties were supposed to produce visible signs of Iranian willingness to exit. Instead, they produced a formal public declaration of indefinite resistance. The munitions dimension adds practical urgency. Defense analysts cited by the Wall Street Journal note that current precision-guided weapon production rates cannot sustain high-tempo operations beyond several additional weeks without creating shortages affecting American military readiness globally. If Iran's timeline is genuinely indefinite and Washington's operational tempo is constrained by production capacity, the asymmetry runs in Iran's favor regardless of the conventional military balance. The economic clock compounds this pressure. Energy analysts at Goldman Sachs cited by Bloomberg project that if Iranian resistance sustains periodic shipping disruptions over an extended period, oil could stabilize $40 to $50 above pre-conflict levels, producing sustained inflationary pressure globally. Iran's economy has operated under severe sanctions since 2012 and has developed structural resilience to external pressure. The global economy has considerably less tolerance for sustained high energy prices without recessionary effects. Duration may cost the outside world more than it costs Tehran. The proxy escalation risk, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Iraqi militia groups, and Houthi forces in Yemen all issued statements within hours praising Iranian determination and pledging continued operations against American and Israeli interests. This creates an escalation risk Iranian planners may not have fully intended. Iranian leadership has historically maintained careful control over proxy escalation timing, calibrating when and how affiliated forces act to serve Tehran's strategic objectives rather than their own. The challenge now is that a public, unconditional commitment to indefinite resistance sends signals to proxy networks that are difficult to modulate precisely. If these forces interpret "as long as it takes" as authorization to launch major independent operations, and those trigger American or Israeli responses that expand the conflict's geographic scope, Iran could find itself managing a wider regional war than its current strategy envisions. The same words that strengthen Iranian resolve domestically may be read very differently in Beirut, Baghdad, and Sana'a. How the world is reading it. European capitals divided sharply. France and Germany argued that Iran's declaration validates warnings that military pressure was not producing diplomatic progress, but creating conditions for protracted conflict. Both governments pressed Washington to open back-channel communications with Tehran before the conflict's trajectory becomes impossible to redirect. A position that reflects not sympathy for Iranian policy, but a pragmatic assessment that no military operation produces a useful outcome if the targeted government has committed publicly to absorbing it indefinitely. The UK took the opposing view, arguing that Iranian refusal to seek ceasefire demonstrates Tehran only responds to sustained pressure, and that any reduction in operations would be interpreted in Tehran as weakness, inviting further aggression. The divergence between London and the major continental powers reflects a genuine strategic disagreement about whether military pressure or diplomatic engagement produces better outcomes. A disagreement that has deepened with every week of inconclusive strikes. China's response was precisely calibrated, supporting Iranian sovereignty while avoiding direct condemnation of American operations, positioning Beijing as the indispensable mediator if negotiations eventually begin. Russia offered similar framing, with Moscow's foreign ministry stating that nations under military attack have every right to defend themselves for as long as necessary. Gulf Arab states responded with the most visible alarm of any regional actors. Saudi Arabia and UAE have invested years in de-escalation, including the 2023 China-brokered normalization agreement with Tehran, precisely to avoid being caught in extended Iranian-American confrontation. Iranian commitment to indefinite conflict directly threatens the economic stability that Saudi Vision 2030 and UAE development ambitions depend upon, and Gulf officials privately told American counterparts that Tehran's statement signals no interest in the regional settlement Gulf capitals desperately need. 3 scenarios. Scenario 1. Public resolve, private pragmatism. The declaration is sophisticated leverage designed to eliminate American assumptions about Iranian breaking points, creating space for eventual diplomacy on equal terms. Iranian leadership privately seeks negotiated outcomes while publicly projecting unconditional resistance. This is consistent with Iranian strategic behavior in previous confrontations. Scenario 2. Genuine indefinite commitment. Iranian leadership has concluded this conflict is existential, that accepting any negotiated outcome under bombardment would set a precedent that fatally undermines the Islamic Republic's domestic legitimacy. The conflict extends for months. Resolution comes through exhaustion rather than victory, with American operational capacity constrained by munitions production and Iranian absorption capacity tested by cumulative damage. Scenario 3. American escalation to regime change. Washington concludes current operations cannot force capitulation within acceptable timelines and moves toward operations targeting Iranian leadership directly. This represents a categorical escalation in commitment and risk, precisely the outcome that current limited operations were designed to avoid. What just shifted for 2 weeks? Both sides operated under implicit assumptions about how this conflict would end. Iran's foreign minister just publicly invalidated the most important American assumption, that Iran was looking for an exit. The strikes continue. The damage accumulates. But the timeline just became Iran's to define, and Iran defined it today as long as it takes. Do you believe Iran's declaration represents genuine strategic commitment, or a calculated negotiating position designed to force diplomacy on equal terms? Share your analysis in the comments. If you value rigorous, sourced geopolitical reporting, subscribe and turn on notifications for our next deep dive.